Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Michael Lilly, Chair of the Planning Committee, and I'll be chairing this meeting. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Romwald Street. This meeting has been live streamed to the Council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. And would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Now, members of the committee and officers will introduce themselves, starting from my left, please.
Good evening, Lynn Barton, Shrub End Ward.
Helen Chua, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Sam McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward.
Martin Warren's Beer Church Ward.
Evening, Chris Pearson, Labour Councillor for Beer Church. Councillor Jeremy Hagan, Stanway Ward, substituting for Roger Mannion. Thank you.
Nigel Chapman, Rural North Ward.
Robert Davidson, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward, substituting for Councillor Jackie McLean.
Councillor Lee Tate for Prettygate Ward.
Simon Cairns, Development Manager.
Good evening, Hayley Parker Haynes, Planning Officer.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, everyone. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras. But please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 8 o'clock, subject to the items remaining. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. Whilst determination of a plan application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies, reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and an expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on grounds of maladministration or a breach of the authority's code. Item 2, substitutes. We've already heard Councillor Hagan for Councillor Mannion, Councillor Davison for Councillor McLean. Item 3, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 4, declarations of interest, please, councillors. Councillor Tate and then Councillor Warnes. Microphone, please.
I sit on the board of Colton's Commercial Holdings Limited, and therefore I have an interest in item 7.2. I shan't be voting on that.
And what sort of interest is that? You have to declare what's. Okay, this is.
Robert, what kind of interest is that?
It's the new one.
Yeah, the new one.
Just bear in mind for people at the time that there has been a change in the code of conduct, and pecuniary and non-pecuniary have gone out the window, and we have different ones which is brought to our attention by Robert, and it's now called. We are asking for training from the.
Sorry, Chair. So just to confirm, disclosable pecuniary interests are still active. It's non-pecuniary, which has been overtaken by registrable interests and non-registrable interests. So Councillor Tate and Councillor Warnes have, which I believe they're both going to declare, but I'll just give the details, are members of CCHL Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited, which is a registrable interest under the Code of Conduct as adopted in December last year.
Let's clear that up. Councillor Warnes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I also declare a registrable interest in item 7.2, and I will not be
taking part or voting on that particular item.
Thank you. Just to be clear, you can actually stay in the meeting now. That has also changed, but you're not allowed to vote. Thank you. Moving on. Item 5 is have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. None. So thanks. So item 6. So 3 minutes. Sorry, there are minutes for approval for the 2nd and the 16th of February. So for the 2nd of February, has anybody got any points to raise from those minutes? No, that's okay. And then we have the 16th of February. Any points? No, that seems to be fine. Yep, we'll sign them at the end. Can I have a vote, please, to confirm both minutes are as. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the applications, and we have 4 items tonight. We have 7.1, 213, 2735, 5 Queens Road, Colchester. That's for approval. The officer is Hayley Parker Haynes. We have no speakers for or against. In 7.2, we have 222817 Eustace King, 15 Osborne Street, Colchester. Change of use of the upper parts. We have no speakers for or against, and Hayley is also the officer presenting for that. We're moving over. We have 7.3, 223010 Lexington Manor, 8 Colvin Close. We have a speaker, Simon Seville, of against, and we have visiting councillor, a sort of visiting councillor, a councillor speak on the item, the councillor Tate. And then we have the number 8, the deed of variation of the legal agreement for plan application 191830 Land, School Road, Langham. So we have to listen to, we will be listening to 7.3 and 8, but we can take 7.1 and 7.2 on block if you so wish to. So any of these 2 items you wish to call out to speak on? No, so Councillor Pearson.
I was just going to move, we take those 2 on block, Chair.
Yes.
So, Chair, as we've already noted, the declarations from Councillor Tate and Councillor Warnes, could I propose that we take these votes separately to ensure that there's no conflict of interest on these items?
I withdraw my motion and say we take both items separately, but with no further discussion, Chair.
Apart from this one, of course. So thank you very much. So 7.1, if we could take that on approval, which includes all the conditions as set out in the report. All those in favour?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then 7.2, the same again, take that on block with all the conditions as laid out in the plan and report, but without Councillor Warnes and Councillor Tate involved. All those in favour, please.
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. If anybody's turned up for the first 2 items, you can now leave if you wish to do so. Oh, you actually going? Oh. Oh, the crowd's gone. The crowd's gone. Okay, item number 7.3. Next to Manor, 8 Colvin Close. We have Hayley to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so this application seeks planning permission for the construction of a single-storey side extension to be used as annex accommodation. This is the location plan. This is the block plan with the extension outlined in black there. These are the existing elevations. These are the proposed elevations. These are the existing and proposed floor plans. These are some site photographs. So this is the view of the dwelling from within Colvin Close. This is view from the location of the development to neighbouring properties to the east. This is the view towards the garage. And this is the view towards the neighbouring properties to the rear. A members' update was circulated prior to the meeting, providing the tree officer's consultation response, which raises no objection, advising minimal impact on the silver birch tree on site, on the neighbouring site, and advises that the extension sits outside the root protection area. There is a verbal members' update to include a condition ensuring that the proposal remains ancillary to the use of the host dwelling to avoid the plot being subdivided. And the application is recommended for approval. The proposed extension, by reason of its flat roof nature, limited footprint and height, is considered to be a subservient addition to the site and would not visually detract from the character and appearance of the site or surrounding area. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a speaker speaking against. Simon Sorrell, please. You have 3 minutes. A bell will sound after 2, and then you'll have a further 1 minute. It will start when you are ready. Thank you.
Right, good evening, committee, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I've been asked to speak on behalf of residents of Marlow Way that have objected to this application. The reason for objection are overdevelopment and being out of character. Until recently, only 4 years ago, the manor house stood alone in substantial grounds surrounded by trees and gardens. The established green enclave contributed substantially to the street scene and open character of the neighbourhood, something difficult to quantify, but evident by having green gaps between buildings rather than a continuous expanse of masonry. The house is not a listed building and has, in Colchester's terms, a relatively recent history, however, remains an impressive and well-known building. Since then, the manor house's grounds have been sold off piecemeal for development. Where there was one house, there are now 5, although I note 3 of these are omitted from the officer's report. One of them has with a bizarrely named cart lodge, effectively a giant garage with habitable rooms above, similar in footprint to many houses in Marlow Way. Despite this, the house and grounds still make a valued contribution to the setting and character of the area. A recent addition to the manor house was the adjacent garage with rooms above. Approval for this was granted with the restriction that its upper rooms are not used for habitation, the purpose of which was to ensure that a separate dwelling would not be created in the grounds. But the current application will do exactly that. Its stated purpose as a granny annex, if you don't mind the term, is to the main house. However, the plans show a connecting door to the garage, and in due course, there is obvious scope for it to be used with the garage as a separate dwelling or even let out as an Airbnb. Should this application be approved, the scale of the combined buildings will be a clear concern. It will fill the gap between the house and the garage with a building the same length as the house is deep. Neighbouring residents will be presented with a continuous built structure within 1 metre of their garden's border. The report has qualified its recommendation by insisting all windows in the extension have obscure glass to prevent overlooking and loss of privacy. Herein lies the clue as to how inappropriate this incongruous opaque annex would be, a flat roofed add-on with no way of seeing out. But it would of course be very visible to neighbours. The application quite literally pushes the boundary of acceptable development. Whilst exact height isn't specified, the extension's encroachment towards the border and increased width will add an imposing continuous expanse of masonry. The officer's report considers the application does not breach limits of development, but that's exactly what they are, limits, not targets, to cover as much ground as possible. Residents enjoy this part of Lexington because of its open aspect. The surrounding overdevelopment, albeit not part of this application, has already degraded this once green corner of Colchester. The committee is asked to refuse this application and halt the drip feeding of requests to infill remaining areas of space. In essence, enough is enough.
Thank you very much. And then we have a visiting councillor, Councillor Lee Tate, if you could take your spot. You know the drill, Lee. And I believe you get 5 minutes. So the bell will go after 4. And if you want to remain there for the debate and such, then that's up to you. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to talk about this planning application in the context of the history of the site, because looking at it in isolation does not tell the full picture. It is quite an irritation that the picture used to display the site is incorrect. It doesn't take account of the existing building going on or the recent development. So that really needs updating. If you haven't been to the site, the picture you get is not representative. The reasons I called this in were that it represents overdevelopment of the site, in my opinion, filling in space for the sake of it, and overdevelopment through stealth. Material considerations, overdevelopment again of the site, harmful overlooking into Marlow Way, potential of becoming a separate dwelling which will generate vehicular movement, and the loss of garden space. So I shall start with the overdevelopment of the site. The site is no longer representative of the area in which it sits, which was only a few short years ago a single dwelling, Lexton Manor, which was a large single well-proportioned character dwelling house with extensive gardens. That description gives the context of this site to inform the definition of what I feel to be overdevelopment. It needs to be taken into account along with the ambience of the whole area of Marlow Way, Colvin Close and Lexton Grove as it was laid out in the 70s, as opposed to a town centre development of a block of flats or maybe 2 up, 2 down terrace housing where you're trying to get the maximum accommodation to the smallest space. Much of the amenity in the garden of the former site has already been lost as a result of the development in 2021 of the immediately adjacent 5-bedroom house and basically a massive garage, which they've called a cart lodge, which has accommodation space above. Currently, in addition, 3 houses are being built facing Marlow Way on what was formerly open space that has been used and enjoyed for over 50 years by residents and the general public. In that context, there is insufficient private amenity space to meet the criteria of DM19 private amenity space. The rear boundary of the annex is in places 1 metre or less from the boundary on what was previously a substantially more open aspect and site, hugely to the detriment of neighbouring properties, leading to a loss of privacy as once enjoyed. The addition of the annex to what is, by the above definition, an already overdeveloped site would simply compound a recently created problem and an already unacceptable position. What was once a magnificent site has been ruined by overdevelopment already. Policy SP7 place shaping principles has already been infringed. That this has already happened is no reason for that now to be compounded. With regard to the separate dwelling or annex, taking into account policy DM13, the report states that development would provide living accommodation for an elderly parent of the applicants, including the provision of a bedroom, ensuite and kitchen, therefore an annex rather than a separate dwelling, and therefore does not provide parking or any other facilities to the required standards for a separate dwelling. The plans for the annex suggest that it would be very easy to convert at a later date into a separate, albeit small dwelling. That is currently scheduled to be an annex, if approved, should be conditioned and permitted development rights removed. In respect of the plans, inconsistencies have been noted in the plan submitted by the applicant's agents. The detailed floor plan shows the outer wall of the extension parallel to the boundary, whereas the site plan shows it closer to the boundary at the north end. We would seek some clarity on which of those is correct. In closing, local residents who are objectors seek a refusal, but if the committee is nonetheless minded to approve, the following conditions are requested to be considered. Firstly, the annex aspect is declared to be formally conditioned to be as such, an annex only to the existing property in order to comply with DM13 domestic development. Secondly, a further development condition and restriction to be imposed, that it must remain a single-storey annex to avoid impact on neighbouring properties and so not as to infringe on DM15 design and amenity. Finally, there is a proposed condition recommended in prevention of overlooking, and it's considered under proposed condition 4 on your papers. However, that in itself would create additional difficulties as earlier highlighted and infringe DM15 design and amenity.
Thank you very much. There's a lot there, and so just to confirm that you're not, for this item, you're sitting out as a member of the committee, so you won't be voting. I think if you want to take a seat, and I think it'd be fair because it's being filmed, just for clarity. Thank you. So Hayley, can we have? Do you think we could have the the application back on the screens, please. If you've got photographs of the side view, the main one would be great. We've had an awful lot of detailed details from Councillor Tate that we'd like to be examined and looked at, because it does say there's an awful lot more to this application than meets, or are we happy with this application? From the site visit today, myself, Councillor Chapman, Davison and Lynn Barton, it did look it's a nice property and it has a lot of work done to it. But is it really overdevelopment and overlooking?
Thank you, Chairman. As detailed within the officer's report, it's not considered to be overdevelopment. It is considered that there's sufficient parking on site to accommodate the development. The amenity space provided for the dwelling would remain in excess of the 100 metres squared as required. I believe it measures at approximately 240 metres squared. So that the plot is capable of accommodating the extension. I believe the extension has a footprint of 40 metres squared approximately. As shown in my presentation, this is the view of the site from the road. So you don't, and I believe those that attended the site visit, you could see that it would not be overly visible within the public realm. I note that a lot of comments refer to the history of the wider sites that sits outside the red line boundary of this application with the three, and I can get that up on Google Maps should you wish to see it. And from street view from Marlow Way of the 3 new builds there. But obviously this application does not impact on their private amenity space or anything like that. And lastly, in relation to the location, the discrepancy between the block plan and the floor plans, I think the floor plans are the inaccurate part with the red line boundary, with the location plan being correct in that it does have a slight kick out towards the rear of the garage. But that's the only small discrepancy I can see there. I'm not sure if Simon has anything further to add.
No, Chairman, just really to reiterate that in terms of its visibility from the public realm, it would be virtually invisible, and being single story only, by definition, it doesn't really overlook. And you'll note on the schedule of conditions, an extremely conservative approach has been taken, requiring obscure glazing above a certain height. So if anyone were tall or standing on a chair, they wouldn't be able to see into any of the neighbouring properties. But set at a normal level, someone within the habitable rooms wouldn't overlook technically the neighbouring properties. With regard to the history of development on site, you are only to consider what is now before you. None of the preceding development is strictly relevant. You have to consider the application on its merits as the site now stands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. We're ready to consider this application before us tonight. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Cairns has just more or less introduced the information that I would have done. I've listened very carefully to our 2 contributors. I appreciate the anxiety that's been expressed perhaps from some of the local residents, but I don't see anything this evening that suggests to me there is any material planning consideration for me to turn down the recommendation that's before us.
Thank you. Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we had a site visit, and as you say, the current proposal single story really wouldn't impact. It would only the roof really would be visible, I think, over the 6-foot wooden fence. The obscure glass, I'm pleased to see that in there, but I'm rather surprised, bearing in mind the concerns of using it commercially, that there isn't a condition suggesting that it should always remain with that property and should only be used for family members, perhaps. It's been applied for family members.
Okay, thank you. Hayley.
Thank you, Chairman. I did provide the verbal members update just to ensure that that condition is included on any approval.
Would that be for family members only?
It will be that so that the proposed annex remains ancillary to the use of the host dwelling.
Would that exclude commercial use, i.e. Airbnb?
Yeah, specifically to be for that aspect to be used individually as an Airbnb. Yeah, no, not a problem whatsoever.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I certainly sort of share the comments about the area around there. I was quite disappointed to see how much development had gone on since I was last there. But as has been said, we are looking at what is before us today. And on that basis, you know, one has to accept that it is permissible as far as we are concerned. So yeah, I accept that, but it's unfortunate that so much development has gone on around there. Yes, I agree with that. But I can't see any way of not accepting this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's actually disappointing to see the amount of development that's taken place on that site. But as you say, the damage has been done now, and this is a totally separate application. You know, we can't look back at that. But as long as the condition's there that it must be used as a separate, you know, it cannot be used as a separate building. And also, can we make a condition that it's only used as a single story annex? Is that possible to do? Thanks.
Thank you. The application's approved in accordance with the plans. As the plans are single story in nature, they'd require another permission if they wanted to build upon that further.
Councillor Davison.
Forgive me, just another thought. Should we withdraw permitted development rights from the annex?
I think I was just thinking that because it had so much work done on this place that the neighbours have had to put up with the residents have put up with a lot. Can we add that as a condition that this is the last? When
We can't remove permitted development rights as part of this application because they've already been removed for the site. Oh, they haven't been removed from this. I thought you said.
Well, if they had, then why have we got this?
Sorry, Chairman. I think what was misinterpreted is, in my opinion, it would be unreasonable given that they have applied for planning permission solely for the annex, and any other permitted development rights would obviously be as they are currently. The removal of permitted development rights would simply require an application to come before you. And I can't think at the present time, given the amount of development that's already occurred, that there's probably much permitted development left, other than Class A alterations or improvements to the existing building. You would have to have a very good reason to withdraw permitted development rights. If you felt strongly about it, we could, of course, do that. And I'm presuming you'd be meaning for further extensions. Yeah, if you felt strongly, we could do that, of course, Chair.
I think that on behalf of the committee that we will, Councillor David has proposed that. I think that is a condition that we would like to impose, mainly for the benefit of the residents, and they'll know there's no more here because it's had an awful lot onto it. It was a nice house originally, but yeah, if we could have that, please, on this application. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you.
Just for confirmation, Chair, do you wish that to extend to outbuildings as well, or simply extensions to the dwelling house?
I think outbuildings and the whole site.
Outbuildings as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pearson.
I move that we go along with the recommendation, along with the conditions that we've just added.
I'll second it, Chair.
So we have a proposal from Councillor Pearson and a seconder from Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour of this application and the conditions that we impose, please put your hands up.
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, committee. And that is passed, I'm afraid, but we'll now move on to the next application. So, Councillor, you can now come back as a committee member. Welcome back. And then we have number 8, deed of variation to the legal agreement for plan and application 191830 Land at School Road Langham. Simon to lead on that, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, members of the public. We have before us this evening an application seeking a deed of variation to an existing legal agreement pertaining to a scheme for 46 dwellings on School Road, Langham. The application seeks to vary 3 clauses in the agreement. I will quickly run through those and explain why it is seen as necessary and appropriate to grant the proposed deed of variation sought. The first relates to Schedule 2, which relates to affordable homes, and an amended trigger is sought to allow 60% of the open market units on site to be occupied before the remainder of the affordable homes are triggered. The reason for this is that there is a condition known as condition 21, which was imposed to ensure that the development only proceeded should there be demonstrable headroom capacity at the wastewater treatment plant that services the development. So far, we have released half the units on site. That's 23 plots, of which 19 are open market units and 4 are affordable homes. In order to implement those units, it is necessary to vary the trigger point from 50% of the units to 60% due to the layout of the site. This is because if we were to trigger the provision of the remainder of the plots, it is simply not feasible on site to safely access those units as they would be accessed through the construction site itself. So the proposal is to vary Schedule 2 within the agreement to allow for 60% of the open market units to be occupied rather than the approved 50% without triggering the delivery of the remainder of all of the affordable units. The second schedule that a variation is sought is much more straightforward, thankfully. It's Schedule 4, which relates to provision of community facilities and specifically the project spend, which was previously specified in the agreement. This is at the request of the parish council. So they wish to vary the project spend to their own preferred projects. The final schedule, Schedule 5, relates to parks and recreation contributions. And again, we have a revised project spend at the request of the parish council. So the final 2 schedules 4 and 5 are basically a revised list of project spends, both triggered by the request from the parish council, whereas the second schedule, Schedule 2, relates to a variation to the trigger point to allow 60% occupancy of open market homes based around the safety of those home occupiers, potentially of the affordable housing units, in order for the existing approved 50% of dwellings on site to proceed with construction without and occupation without triggering the provision of all of the remaining affordable homes on site. Hopefully that's clear, but happy to take any questions, Chair.
I'll go to the Royal Council first, which is Councillor Chapman, and then we'll take Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think it's very exciting what the parish council are planning to do with this money that they're getting, and they've got very exciting plans, as I say. So I'm very happy to support that. And as Mr. Kane said, it's quite complicated, the other part of that, but I can understand why it's necessary, and I think we need to support that as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I do think it's unfortunate that we didn't see this at the time, given the amount of time that we spent on this application, that the build would be such that it would cause difficulties when we got to the 50% of the marketable properties and couldn't then build the others without difficulty. But that said, I don't think we really have any alternative but to agree to these variations this evening. So I would so move, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, and with the issues over the waste, it does seem a very complicated site, but I know that they're going to upgrade their cricket facilities down there, which I'm all in favour of course. Marvellous, and summer's come up for a proper sport. So have I got a seconder for this application? Not to go and play cricket, but councillor Chapman, seconder, proposed by councillor Pearson, with all the conditions attached. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
That is unanimous, Chair.
Sorry, and before we go and end it, just have to, because when we do on block ones, we have to read a legal declaration, or I do. And I forgot to do after that, so apologies. I can confirm that those items that have been determined in line with the officer recommendation in the report and amendment sheet, and there will not be further discussion on those items. Any interested parties in attendance for those items may wish to leave now, but it just covers us that we took in notice of all the conditions. You can leave if you so wish to. That concludes the meeting for tonight. Thanks everybody up for turning up. See you next week. Next week, it's quite a big application for solar farms over at Birch. We will be doing a site visit, so I think this one will need a really good site visit from us all. If you can attend, it'll be next Thursday at 2 o'clock outside the town hall. So we meet here before 2 and we drop off at 2 as well, afterwards if you wish.